Welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast. We are so glad that you would join us today as we continue to hear from a wide range of Aussie and global specialists and practitioners when it comes to multiplication and church planting. But before we jump into our episode today, we wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about our sponsor for this podcast, the Church Co. The Church Co is a website and app platform specifically designed for and with churches and church planters in mind. And the best part is that they actually build the website and app for you, so you don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of time, money, and energy learning a new tool. You might think that this would cost a whole bunch, but they are a ministry. And the price is similar to hosting a website at simply $29 a month. Also, the best part is that they are based here in Australia, so they understand the Aussie church and are building amazing tools with and for the Australian church in mind. So we want to strongly encourage you to check out the Church Co, as well as some promotional opportunities that we have with them. That's all from us for now, and we hope that you enjoyed this fortnight's episode of the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast.
Well, hi there and welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast. We are so glad that you have joined us today as we continue to hear from a whole different range of leaders and voices when it comes to multiplication and church planting in Australia, as well as learning from around the globe. And today we are joined by an incredible young couple who are literally in the beginning stages of planting a church. They have planted Cultivate Church in Melbourne, and we are joined by Daniel and Michiko Lotriet. It is so great to have you guys join us on the podcast today.
Charlie, it is an honor to be with you and all the Exponential listeners here. Thanks for having us.
So good. Well, we're so looking forward to hearing all about who you are, the journey that the Lord has you guys on. And I should say it is just a passion of ours, particularly to see young church planters who are so fresh in the journey. We were talking before we hit record just about how significant it can be to actually hear from those who are doing it live. I think sometimes we can hear stories of yesteryear, and of course we're charged by that, we're encouraged by that, but it's so good to hear from those who, as I mentioned before, are literally only 6 months into the journey of planting. Before we hear about Cultivate, I'd love for you guys just to tell us a bit about yourselves. Tell us about some of your journey up into today. You spent time overseas. Tell us about how you guys met. Give us the sketch.
All right, well, we'll condense it as much as we can. It's a bit of a story, but so I'm from Canada. I essentially came to Australia for my sister's wedding, met this guy. He chased me back in Canada. We got married in Vancouver, and then we felt called to Melbourne, ministry in Melbourne. So we came back to Melbourne to live. And I mean, my background, I felt called to mission since I did YWAM in 2012. I did YWAM in Kona, Hawaii, and that's when God really put missions on my heart. And I think for a while I thought that God was calling me to overseas missions, and that, I was really passionate on fire to go to some foreign country and, plant there and just do the missionary life. But God slowly showed me over the years that he was calling me to local missions, and that just every day was the missions field. And so I've worked in hospitality for a lot of my life, and God opened up a lot of doors to being missional at work and in hospitality, and he really grew my heart for hospitality and serving people, loving people that way. And then now, I mean, Daniel always jokes around that it's like, Michiko, you are doing overseas missions, you're in Australia now. And so here we are, now planning a church here in Melbourne. So it's been a bit of a journey, but
that's huge.
Here we are.
Yeah. Daniel, tell us some of course, the version from Michiko of you chasing her over to Canada. Tell us some of that story. Tell us some of the ways the Lord was preparing you guys for where you are now, and ministry and planting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so followed Michiko to Canada, and it was a step of faith. I remember going to ask Michiko out for the first time. I went there on a holiday, and I got on a plane, had 2 aborted takeoffs on the runway, was on the tarmac for 3 hours. On the way to LA, vomited 3 times, stood in a customs line for 2 hours in LA, and missed my connecting flight. Got to Vancouver, and Michiko was just there, ready to pick me up. And that same day, she said, "I think I'm ready to date now." So I said, "Will you be my girlfriend?" And that was it for us. And so, you know what? You got to do what you got to do, fellas who are listening to this. And so, moved to Vancouver 6 months later after some long distance. And we joined a great church that was actually in startup phase, Vivid Church, which was a couple of months old at the time. And we actually got to see some really real life church planting on the ground. And that was really formative in us, both then, but even now we look back to that period of being part of a small team that's having a crack in a big city. And so when we moved back to Australia 6.5 years ago, we actually came back with a sense that, hey, God is calling us to plant a church. We're just not sure when.
Wow.
We knew it would happen. It was just about when. And so since that journey, we ended up joining a small local Church of Christ here in Melbourne, Steeple Church of Christ, and serving the team there. Michiko leading the cafe that the church ran, which was a missional cafe in a co-working space. And I eventually ended up on staff doing church operations. And so that was great groundwork for us to learn, I guess, a lot of the ins and outs of church. And then eventually we actually felt that church planting was coming towards us, which might sound odd, but it felt like the timeline was coming towards us, what God had wanted us to do. And so we just took a big step and said, all right, God, make the way. And here we are 6 months post launch.
Wow.
So that's the Cliff Notes of our story.
I love that. And we're going to dive into some of those details more, because I am interested to hear both some of those nuts and bolts. I think, you and I, Daniel, have spoken about how real that can be, a whole bunch of stuff that you're just plainly not aware of until you're in it. And of course, we don't bore people with all the kind of the policy side of things. We want to inspire and encourage people today, but you've been right in it. Like, you've been in it, all the different things that, as we go to Bible college or as we spend time in different ministry contexts, no one ever prepares you for the type of things that you're going to have to do if God calls you to plant a church. So I actually think that's a really helpful conversation to talk about. But to begin with, before we do get to that, I'd love to hear why Cultivate. We talked about a church planting was coming towards you. As you were in that season, shout out to Corey Mitchell and Steeple. I'm sure he would have been amazing, particularly as you were sensing that call to plant. As you were in that in-between season, knowing that planting was coming to you at some point, how were you guys preparing?
Yeah, you mentioned Corey and the Steeple crew there. We were given a lot of license, actually, which was great, and a great encouragement to a lot of leaders listening to this. When you have what I'll call green leaders, young leaders with potential, to give opportunity to spread their wings and have a crack at different things. So we were given a lot of license, which was really helpful, especially now when you look at church planting. You're given a lot of license. You got to make decisions and work things out and think about how we're doing things. And so that was great preparation on the ground for us both to play a part in that team. The other preparation piece was obviously theological study was important for me. Going to Bible college and learning that some of the essentials there was really big. To just kind of give it a great grounding for me. And that was critical. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd echo what you said in that Corey was great, and that he just gave us the open door to step into different places that kind of helped us build certain areas of our life that we can implement into church planting. So for me, I've never really wanted to be in a leadership role of any sort. It's really something that I would have ran away from, truthfully.
Which if I can interrupt, says to me that you're probably a great leader. You know what I mean? Like it says to me those who have that hard want to avoid the limelight that the Lord would use.
You can only hope. But so Corey was great. Like he I guess he saw that in me, and he said he wanted to put me in that sort of leadership role. So he got me leading the hospitality team and managing the cafe, and even that in itself, it was a small baby step, but I think for me at the time it was really big. But I really honored that he saw that in me, called it out, and gave me that opportunity. And so I think that helped just grow me in the beginning stages of leadership. And I think I feel so like beginning level of leadership. And so that's been a real challenge, I think, in this season right now in starting this church plant, is just feeling, do I have what it takes to lead a church? I feel like sometimes I just don't know what I'm doing. But I think I think being at Steeple was really great, and that Corey brought those opportunities for us to kind of grow us in different ways, and it's definitely played into where we are now. So yeah, very grateful.
I think that's brilliant. And, I think that's a huge, if I could possibly underline or kind of highlight for our listeners today, just how significant that is, like to give people who sense this call to maybe pioneer or do something courageous for the kingdom at some point in their life, opportunities to begin to test that, because it would have been in that season, I imagine, that you were, as you're saying, Michiko, you're starting to actually go, as much as I've got all those insecurities that you talk about, as much as those things I think are par for the course when it comes to church planting, you're able to begin to practice, test, and I guess craft your gifts. As intimidating as the prospect of doing something on your own is still inevitably going to be, there's something beautiful giving people opportunity to practice that.
And what was amazing to watch on the sidelines was, like, I preach and have platform ministry opportunities regularly, and then Michiko started, which is awesome, started doing communion and offering. And Michiko, again, doesn't want to touch the microphone. Complete natural. People are weeping. Right?
Wow.
People are weeping from her messages.
So good. I believe it.
And I'm seeing impact. And I'm like, good, fantastic, great. But it was so awesome to see someone just step in a place of being uncomfortable, but doing it for the Lord.
Yes.
And there's something beautiful about that. And even this Sunday, Michiko preached for the second time ever this Sunday in our church, and people are just loving it. And so, just being open to growing and being in that place of being uncomfortable has been, I guess, a hallmark in terms of our journey and growth, and being okay to just say, I'll just have a crack.
Yes.
Even though sometimes I don't feel like I'm ready. And God's just been so faithful in that.
So good, guys. I love that. Love your heart. Love all that you're sharing in that. And it's so true. I don't think in all the kind of conversations I've had with church planters around the globe and in Australia, I don't think anyone ever feels conclusively ready. I don't think there's like a definitive moment where we're like, yeah, I'm ready to plant a church. And if anything, that should almost be a point of concern, because it is something that we should be ready for. But as I'm sure we're going to talk more about today, like there's this sense of when have you felt a greater need for faith, a greater need to kind of depend upon God. There is just something about those seasons of you're not ready, but the Lord has invited you to take that step. I don't know if you guys have got any further thoughts about that. I've kind of stolen some of your thunder there, because I know that's something you've been kind of, thinking about recently as well, Daniel.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we live in a shoebox apartment, 42 square meters, absolute shoebox, and we started with a team total, including us, of 6 people, and we were meeting for about 11 months just to form culture and form a sense of team. And we then reached the stage where, like, actually our apartment can't hold any more than 6 people. Like, we will just be all over each other if we stay in this way. And we felt it's time to go public, to launch. And we hired a little community center space and just did this launch, very low key. The marketers in the world would be horrified at how little we put into marketing it. And our venue held 80 people, and we ended up with 81 people came. Just one more than capacity, which is a beautiful thing. And people from that launch are still like part of our church today. And there was this element of, like, literally, all right, God, we feel that you're calling us to take this step of faith to just go public, but we have no idea who's going to come. Like, we thought, honestly, we might get 20 to 30 people there. Like, I don't know who's going to rock up. And from that same day, people who we hadn't seen in 5-6 years, people we hadn't met before, and are part of our team as a church.
Wow.
And there's something about planting which, like, we can't change hearts. We actually can't. And I can't finesse someone into doing something they don't want to do. But when we take a step of faith, what we've found in our journey is that it actually gives God room to do what he wants to do in people's lives. And it's the most encouraging thing to us, because it's like, oh yeah, God wants to do it his church.
Yeah.
I can have all the strategies, all the ideas, but he's going to do it in his way. And so that's been a great encouragement for us, is every step of the way, God has just done something that we weren't expecting.
Yes.
In a really beautiful way.
Wow. Well, you've kind of fast forwarded a little bit there to kind of launch. And I'd love to almost take a step back and go, tell us about Cultivate. Like, you talked about spending 11 months in your living room or your studio, your 42 square meter apartment. Tell us about what led you to call your church Cultivate. Tell us about that metaphor of Cultivate. Why Cultivate? Tell us about some of the ins and outs of that.
Well, it wasn't a random action verb generator, I promise. Spent a lot of time in prayer and just asking God the question of, like, well, look, Lord, it's your church that you put on our hearts. What do you want it to be? What's your vision? What's your mission for this church? We're stewards of this season as founding pastors, but ultimately it's yours, Lord. And the parable of the sower really captivated me for a long time. Like, it just really hit me between the ears, and I could not escape this parable. And what really struck me was when Jesus explains the parable to the disciples, he talks about how the good soil, Mark chapter 4, the good soil was the one which, produced a crop 30, 60, and 100 times what was sown.
Wow.
And the question was for us, well, what makes good soil? The seed is the same for every soil. The farmer scatters the same seed, the message of the kingdom, the word of God. But the soils change. But Jesus doesn't actually say what the good soil is explicitly. But for us, It was like, well, wait a second. If our hearts have good soil, if our hearts are cultivated right, well, it will bear fruit for the kingdom of God. And so that's where the name comes from. Cultivate. It comes from the parable of the sower.
Wow.
To ask the question, well, am I having a heart which cultivates? It's just cultivated in such a way that it has good soil for God's seed to come into my life and bear fruit. So that's the name.
That's epic. I love that. And has that meant anything particular in practice? Like, has there been something in that has been front of mind for you guys as a church that you're trying to cultivate? Like, obviously trying to cultivate your heart, the kingdom of God in your midst. What does that look like when Cultivate gets together on Sunday and throughout the week?
Yeah. I think something that we really want to highlight at Cultivate is just the importance of discipleship. And, we want to make disciples who will make disciples, and really putting the importance on that piece is great, because then it's not just up to the pastors, like we want to make disciples, but then, we're all called to go make disciples. It's not just us. So I think we really want to cultivate that culture of discipleship. And so we practically we'll have discipleship groups every other week. So right now, because we're so small, we kind of split up into two. So the guys will meet at one day, and then the girls meet another day. And so we really just want to create a space where we can just really check in with one another and see how are things going in your own personal walk with God. Like, where are you feeling challenged? Where do you feel, how are you trying to grow in your walk with the Lord? And trying to keep each other accountable, and just really getting people to press in hearing God's voice, whether that be prayer, reading the Bible, just those simple practices that produce fruit, really.
Yes.
So
yeah, I think that's
Yeah, and to answer your question, on a Sunday, we do a couple little things a bit differently. Like, we'll start with worship and go into prayer, but our prayer, we're trying to cultivate a culture of prayer. So we actually say, all right, let's break up into small groups around you and let's share with each other and pray for one another.
Wow. And
move away from, I guess we'll call it like passive reception to active participation.
Yes.
What actually has been so beautiful, there've been people who are brand new to faith, people who've never been a part of churches, who initially this is like, what do I say? What do I do? And they'll just sit back and watch. And now they're praying in our pre-service prayer meetings.
Wow, come on.
And getting people to actually take steps that make them feel uncomfortable in the best way, in a really safe and healthy environment. It's how we've structured things a little bit differently. Even our message series at the moment is just exegetically looking at the whole book of Acts and then breaking up as much as we can into small group discussion mid-message and ask questions to get people thinking. So we're trying to get people, I guess, active in that discipleship. We see Sundays and our catch-ups as a discipleship opportunity, not just a Sunday service.
Yes.
We're not just administering a service, we're gathering together as the church, and it's a discipleship opportunity. So a bit of a shift in terms of our thinking.
So good. And that's something that you guys as a couple and as leaders have been practicing. And I'd love to hear, you guys are both co-vocational. Michiko, you mentioned before that you're still working in hospitality. Daniel, you're working in an environment that provides opportunity for you to be able to connect with a whole bunch of people in the workplace. Tell us how that has meant a huge deal for you, both the pain of church planting and the juggle of attempting to do it all while still working, but also when you're talking about the importance of discipleship and disciples making disciples on a Sunday, that's not in a vacuum. You guys are actually doing it Monday to Friday.
Yep.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think, been one of the, I guess, more of the challenges in this season is figuring out the juggle, as you say. So I'm actually right now, I am working. It's kind of random. I've stepped away from hospitality. Kind of, yeah. I have a couple things happening, but working as full-time at a Scandinavian travel agency.
Wow.
So it's like it's Melbourne-based, but the owner is from Oslo.
Wow.
Anyways, that's my full-time job, but that job gives me the flexibility to then be able to kind of do my own side business as well. So it gives me the time, if I need to do. So I do a grazing table business as well, so that if I have events in the middle of the day, I can kind of sandwich my day in a different way. But it also, honestly, I really felt a lot of peace taking this job because I felt like, and I see it now, that it's giving me a lot more headspace and energy to invest a bit more into the church planting stuff. So that's been a huge blessing, actually. But it is definitely, I'm seeing God stretch me in different ways with the way that I manage my time and the way I prioritize my time over other people's time, and just figuring out, how I can sacrifice my own time for other people, but yeah, figuring out the juggle and how to do that I think is an ongoing thing that I'll be learning, that we'll both be learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you mentioned my work. I work 3 days a week in a co-working space, and I get the opportunity to pastorally care for a bunch of different businesses, from startups to multinationals, from uni students to CEOs. And it's a beautiful opportunity to actually put into practice what I preach. And it means that as a church planter, we're actually super aware of the challenge of juggling church and work, which is great, because I think sometimes as leaders we get so focused on achieving a goal as a church that we forget that people have jobs and families.
Yes.
The second piece, what it does, it actually helps us to think about our theology of faith and work.
Yeah.
Okay, how am I putting my faith into practice in my workplace? And then for me, I get to actually talk about that on a Sunday. It means that I can't challenge our church with a hey, who are you reaching missionally, or who are you praying for, or who's God placed in front of you, without providing my own story. And that's been really great. And so it's a real juggle. We don't have a church office for people to come on a Tuesday at 12 and have a chat with us. But it means that we have to be intentional with our time and work around people's schedules and our schedules, but also actually protect time together as a married couple, because our marriage needs to be healthy. So Sunday afternoon is a sacred time for us, Sunday night, which is awesome. Also, when we go to the football together to watch Carlton, happy to put in there. But yeah, it is a real juggle, Charlie. And so it's realities of church planting, but at the same time, it's like, wow, what an honor that we can take part in what God is doing in our area.
Yeah, it's great.
What a privilege.
I love that. And it actually causes me to want to take our conversation a bit of a different direction, or come back to, because I still want to hear about some of nuts and bolts. I think that's a really important thing for us to talk about. But I know for you guys, and you've just mentioned the importance of some sacred rhythms that you guys have in life, which can be really hard, like as when you're pioneering something, when you're building something, it is an all of life pursuit. It's not something that is 9 to 5. Obviously for you guys, it's not, you're doing it on top of, work throughout the week. But I know that in this season, there is this growing sense, particularly a lot of maybe younger leaders would have, that they don't want to be responsible for burning people out. Like they don't want to play their role in potentially perpetuating some of the maybe the unhealthier parts of ministry that we're seeing exemplified in the last 10 to 20 years of church in the West. I wonder if you would speak to some of that, because if you're talking about cultivating a healthy church environment, healthy rhythms, healthy lives, orientated around kingdom, what has that meant for you in terms of, maybe not running as fast and yet wanting to go together with a group of people in order to do it in a way that's healthy, and he's not going to burn people out, and he's going to be a great example of a healthy life lived?
Yeah, it's one of my old pastor in Vancouver, Justin Reimer, shout out, said to me many years ago. Again, I'm not sure where the statistic comes from, so please don't fact check me on what I'm about to say. But the majority of people who start with you at a church plant leave within 2 years. And
I wish I knew that. I wish I knew, like just to interject, like no one ever told me that. And I wouldn't say that it was the majority, but it was definitely a reasonable percentage. And I don't think average church planter is prepared for that,
Yeah. And I think part of that can be the fact that early days, everyone's putting their hand to the plow and they want to, put on a gathering on a Sunday and do their best. But the key for us is a bit of a mindset shift, right? I think we can be very Sunday centric when it comes to church leadership. Now, Sundays are important. We don't diminish them at all. But actually, if the focus is whole of life discipleship for us, and Sundays are a part of that, I think what it does as leaders, it actually makes us ask different questions. It means that we don't go, hey, notice you didn't practice guitar this week. Or, hey, notice you didn't respond to planning center. It's actually different. It's like, hey, how's your life going? How's time with God? And even how we pastor and the questions we ask our people actually focuses far more on, hey, how is your pursuit of Jesus going? Because that's our actual focus, is whole of life discipleship. Because I think ultimately the measure for us as leaders will not be how slick Sundays were. It will be, did we actually go and make disciples?
That's great.
And so we're at the point where we demonstrate it actively, to put it into really practical terms, where if we can't get friends in, or if we can't spread the load in certain roles for, say, Sundays, we'll bench people just because we think it's healthy practice, who are still there and available to serve, and we'll do YouTube worship. We've done it twice. Now, that sounds, someone from a worship background, that sounds horrifying, but then I think the big picture, it's like, wait a second.
In there, man. It's good. Yeah.
Like, what did I actually preach to everyone? I said, we care about whole of life discipleship.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to burn people at the altar of a perfect Sunday.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, by the way.
Absolutely it does. I think that's real. Because I think, as I've had conversations with different church planters, and like, I don't think any of us set out to, and I say this hopefully with a great deal of respect and honor, like, we don't set out to just run a schmick service. We don't set out to burn people out. We don't set out to potentially, and of course the seasons of great sacrifice, all of that great stuff, but it's got to be done with this sense of joy and lightness, and for the sake of people, not for the sake of running a program.
100%.
I would like to now
say,
please.
Sorry, on that, the other side of that is actually, again, with the people that join, it's actually giving them the opportunity to take part in serving, to bless God and to as an act of worship, but also bless the rest of the team who's already serving for their sake.
Yeah.
And I think actually something about scarcity fosters a sense of togetherness. And we're at this point now in our church where when we do a pack down, everyone's doing something, including visitors.
Yeah.
Which is unreal. And so, yeah, we're loving that.
So true. Yeah, that is a trend that I resonate with. People just feel like, oh, I'm here, I'm part of it. Even if I'm visiting for the first time, I'm the odd one out if I'm not putting a chair away.
Exactly.
100%.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in fact, I've heard, I know it's different and there's no kind of rule of thumb, but even some people are saying when they actually get their own facilities where they have, such a degree of team where people are not needed, that can actually where some of that level of collaboration, faith begins to diminish within the life of a church, which probably also speaks to, we might need to plant another church if there are listeners listening to this going, that's how we feel at the moment.
Good job.
Yeah. Hey, let's get to the nuts and bolts because I think that is really important. And I'd just love for you to just this is kind of the last thing that I really want to hone in on today. Just paint us a bit of a sketch of some of the things that maybe surprised you, things that you didn't know about. We don't need to kind of dive too deep into them, but it would just be, I think, a really helpful checkbox, maybe for some planters or potential planters who are listening to this podcast going, I hadn't even thought about that stuff. Throw it at us.
Want to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
To be honest, I think sometimes when you have a God-given vision, right, and you have a sense of faith and you want to go, let's go right now. I think sometimes what can happen is things like good governance practice can be forgotten, and then you're kind of retrofitting it later and stuff like that, which is so, I know it's at the antithesis of church plans, church planners' hearts, right? No one wants to do spreadsheets. No one wants to do all that kind of nitty gritty stuff. But we found it's actually been really releasing for us.
Yes.
To actually do the hard work in the background to kind of have a platform to launch from in terms of using all that brain power before we've launched to figure that out. That's been really good. The other thing I think was really interesting was we decided to put our actual theological beliefs hidden away on our website. And again, maybe a bit different. Statement of beliefs, nothing too hectic, 2 pages. And I can't tell you the amount of people who aren't part of our church or who are part of our church that have come up to me and said, I've actually read your belief statement. Wow. It's blown me away. And so what I've learned, actually, both non-Christians and Christians, is that people actually want to know what you're about. And sometimes I think saying we're a church, that leaves a lot of open definition. Yeah. But there's something about actually saying, hey, here's who we are, and just being open and transparent and authentic with people that they can actually get to know you a bit better and what you really carry in your heart.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of things. I honestly didn't even think about this, and I thought, it's funny how I didn't think about it before planting, but planting a church has opened so many doors to conversation with people at work who, aren't Christian. Just by explaining, what did you do on the weekend, and just talking about, went to church, and what kind of church did you go to? We're me and my husband are planting a church, and then it's planting what is that? We started a church.
Opening a nursery.
yeah, exactly. So I just think it's been so fun to have that conversation because you can just see the wheels in people's heads turning, and just these boxes that they have, the idea of Christians to be in, to kind of being broken in a way. So that's been really fun along the journey, is just having those conversations. Something else that's been awesome has just been, honestly, there's been so much prayer in lead up to this church plant, and I think that's something we always are pressing into, is just praying, but being so encouraged by seeing the way that God has been answering prayer, but not always in the way that we would have imagined it to be answered. The way that the church plant has kind of slowly taken place is, just not really in the way that we would have thought. But God has been encouraging us so much along the way, of the people that are coming through the doors, and just these amazing people that we're getting to meet, and like interceding for each one of them, and seeing, not in like a very like over the top sort of way, like people's lives being changed and transformed, but just being really encouraged and seeing little bits of fruit and hunger within them, and seeing their desire to want to know Jesus more and like grow in a community together has been so awesome and encouraging. And so I think that's something that I found encouraging in the way, is just taking the time to really pray and just seeing what God has been doing in the little things, opposed to like really big things. I think it's been like the little things that have been encouraging. So
yeah, and I think in the nuts and bolts of the week, like you can be, the best thing about planting is, you know, the people, and the worst thing about planting is the people. And let's be honest, call a spade a spade, and it's still an honor, and God is at work. But it's like,
totally.
Oh yeah, I have to be reminded. Look what God did in that person's life.
Yes.
Look at that green shoot. Look at that step, and it's like, yes, oh yeah, I'm reminded. God is building His church.
Yeah, it's
good.
At
the end of the day, and that's the best encouragement that we see is the growth in people. It's true privilege.
That's great. Well, guys, I think that is a beautiful place to finish our conversation today. It's been an absolute joy and a privilege. You guys have been open and real and really heartfelt, and I think it's going to touch a lot of people who have heard some of your story today. So I just want to absolutely thank you both for being on the podcast, and we're cheering you on at Cultivate Church, and look forward to hearing many wonderful stories of God's small, large, and miraculous transformation over the years to come.
Thanks for having us,
so much, Charlie.
Good to chat.